everybody. Welcome to Inside Radio. I am your host, Danielle Agnew, and you are a fly on the wall to everywhere. Happy week. Oh my goodness. Whose head is just spinning a little bit from the retrograde Jupiter and our retrograde Saturn? Who is getting their full attention just set right now on breaking patterns from the past? I mean, how are you all doing with that? I am noticing a lot of my clients calling in. They're like, holy moly, I've got this massive thing going on right now, and I want to handle it like I've always handled it, ABC and move on. And it's not working for people because Jupiter retrograde is going, wait, you got to change it up. And Saturn retrograde is going, well, I'm not going to help you figure this out. Whatever, dig deeper. You can do it. So I have to tell you, gang, it's so much fun to watch the new beginnings. There are so many new beginnings right now, and I am like head spun by the new beginnings, and I'm hoping you kind of are too, because we have a tendency as human beings to get a little freaked out when things start to change, right? Yet we are meant to change. We are a species that is supposed to evolve. We're not supposed to stay static, yet we get into these weird armchair moments. That's what I like to call them. These armchair moments of our lives where we're like, what do you mean I have to grow? Come on. I'm just really comfy with my perfect pillow and my cat is around my neck and my dog's on my lap and I don't want to grow right now. You know what? I'll tell you what. The best way to grow during this retrograde, both huge planets, Jupiter and Saturn, the best way to grow with that is to actually just sink into that lazy boy and stop trying to push the freaking river. Just stop. Let the river do its thing. You ever notice a river kind of flows anyway because it works with gravity? Our life path is so much the same way, gang. And I deal so much with these angels all the time. And these angels are constantly telling me, well, I'm paraphrasing a lot here, but these angels are constantly telling me, hey, take a chill. It's fine. Your life is going where you need it to go. So you don't need to try to push. Just allow the momentum of the angle of your terrain to take what's coming down the hill and stop pushing so hard. And it's hard because we were trained, for those of us who are over the age of 8 years old, we were trained in the old realm. We were trained under those energies of the patriarchal, of the imbalanced masculine. The divine masculine is like, hey, chill out, man. Have a beer. Let's all get along. What's everybody's problem? The imbalanced masculine is that one little guy, who drives the really jacked up truck, who's always like, hey, you want to fight? That would be the imbalanced patriarchal right there. So when we look at these energies and we look at the opportunities that we've had to grow with this retro Jupiter and this retro Saturn, I mean, this is awesome, gang. Seriously, it's okay that you're in the lazy boy and you don't want to do anything. Allow the feminine time frame to have a really great conversation with you about how to proceed forward by not doing the exact same things you always did to bail you out before. That's what this entire thing is about. That's what this entire section of our learning is about. So if you're not feeling like you have a ton of get up and go right now, if your get up and go is got up and left, then don't get all weirded out with yourself. Just honor that feeling. It's the divine feminine saying, you know what? You don't really need to go out there and fake it till you make it. Just be who you are and do what you do, and it's going to be okay. So just know that, because I can feel a lot of you out there struggling. Really, when I feel into many of you are struggling, like, I don't know what to do with myself. I don't know which way to go. I don't know how to take my You know what? Just sit in your universal lazy boy. Listen to the river to your right, that the own terrain of your experiences is creating the flow of, and just receive for a minute, Man, gang, I tell you, the old world wanted us to believe we had to freaking knock ourselves out and kill ourselves trying to get something done. Yet this is the time frame that when we apply our gifts and talents, I mean, you can't just sit there on your hands, okay? Let's be a little more specific. We can't just sit there and be a deadbeat in our own life. I mean, we can, yet universe is not going to come save us from ourselves, okay? That's not the universe's job to save us from ourselves. The universe's job is to co-create with us that which we desire more than anything. Honestly, that's it. And so, we started on this journey back in the, 2000s, way back in the 90s, I think the late 90s, wasn't it? Or the early 2000s with What the Bleep Do We Know? And then The Secret came along and, here we are now. So why am I talking about all this? Why am I talking about flow and not fighting what's trying to present itself in your life? Because I have some really, really big news that I am really excited about. And I have been, I don't want to say sitting on this news, yet being told to just wait to announce this news until we made an official announcement about it. And we finally did. So I am so excited to announce that I have a brand new television show coming out. And it's called The Road Angel with Danielle Agnew. And I get to go on the road and I get to do exactly what I do for people, yet I get to go where I'm called on the road, out there to actually see people and weigh in with communities that are struggling and be able to help people with life path issues that are knocking them out and get into communities where normally, people don't necessarily always venture, perhaps, who happen to have the skill set that I have. And I am so excited about this, gang, and I would be so honored if you would go and check out our Road Angel with Danielle Agnew Facebook page. We have a Road Angel website. So if you go to roadangeltv.com, you can watch the trailer. If you go to the Road Angel with Danielle Agnew on Facebook, you can watch the trailer there. I would be super honored, actually, if you all would share that trailer around Facebook, and I'll tell you why. We've been working on this show for over a year, and the producer of the show and myself, Mary Erickson, is the producer, and we have been working so hard to, as Mary would put it, put out a show that goes from the tabloid level to the temple level. And not that we're being all lofty and weird. I mean, come on, it's me. Pretty much what you're hearing here is what you're getting on television. Yet, we really want to stress how amazing that the universe is. And have you guys watched The Kindness Diaries? Anybody watching The Kindness Diaries? That is a really great show, and I haven't had the opportunity to really sit down and watch it. Yet the premise is there's this dude that goes across the country, and apparently he doesn't have not even $1 in his pocket, and he has to live off the kindness of others. And it's just about the honest to God nature of humanity, and that we are not a god-awful species. We're not. We're awesome. And I know this because I deal with angels all day. I deal with people all day who have light eking out of them like a character from a Steven Spielberg movie, yet they think their life is over. And so with the Road Angel, I get an opportunity to take all of these incredible angelic messages and these miracles that I get to see. I get to witness so many miracles, gang. It is nuts. I'm not even kidding. And we get to put it on television so people can finally start to see what's really out there, that there is support for us, that there is hope for us as a species, as human beings that support one another, that this isn't just some incarnation sunk with weird politics and bizarre violence, and certainly that exists, absolutely. Yet when we come together as a species, what we are capable of, gang, is so unbelievable. So I am really excited to actually announce my TV show, The Road Angel. And we are in pre-production right now. And for those of you that don't work in the TV industry, pre-production just means that, you're taking meetings, you're figuring things out with the production manager. Our production manager, Melissa Siana, is fabulous. So I'm having this amazing opportunity to just be surrounded by this team of incredible people who are assisting me in just putting out there what is possible for the human species when we actually open ourselves up and we bring our best forward. So again, the show is called The Road Angel. I'll stay tuned. I'll keep you posted as we've got, more coming in and, when we're going to be airing and all that good stuff and where and, how and all that good stuff. Yet right now, I just wanted to share that with you because I know I've been like dropping these teasers and I've gotten some mail from some of you that's like, look, if you're not going to tell us, just shut the frick up. Okay. Just shut up about it. But I literally couldn't say anything until everything officially launched. So if you want to get a hold of the Road Angel crew and you want to shout out about an issue that you've been having, then please head over to roadangeltv.com. And once you do that, there's a Contact the Road Angel section there, and that goes to the production team. And I am literally being directed all over the country down America's back road highways to go help people. And if I happen to be in a town where you are, that is awesome. And maybe we'll have an opportunity to actually rub elbows and maybe, who knows, maybe I'll even get an opportunity to help you out. So anyway, you can head on over to roadangeltv.com and you can hit us up there. And again, just come hang out on our Facebook page because it's so cool. We are building a community of light bringers. We are building a community, hashtag Team Light, gang. I mean, I am so passionate about bringing the best forward that we all have because we're going to need it. We're coming into some time frames here where what's going to be very important is that we can all come together in a way that supports one another, that really truly supports one another and the earth. We've got climate issues coming up, gang, that are coming up way faster than we thought. I remember back in 2016, I was putting out some videos about water and about earthquakes and all kinds of other stuff. And I had some folks writing to me that were mad. And they were saying, hey, look, you're talking about the sea levels raising 20 feet in 5 years. And that was back in 2016. So what is that? 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, right in there. And people are saying that's just not correct. Science doesn't even support that. And your hoodoo science and your weirdo science isn't helping fear when all you're doing is wandering around and claiming that the sea levels are going to rise, 5 to 20 feet, depending on where we are in the world in 5 years. That's misinformation and you're irresponsibly using your platform and blah, 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 blah. Well, as we know, I just kind of pass on what I'm given to pass on, okay? And now we've got all kinds of world scientific information coming out going, it's probable that the sea levels will raise up to 20 feet in the next 5 years. And hey, you know what? I'm not here to say, yay, I was right. I don't want to be right about raising sea levels. I am not that much of a Debbie Downer, okay? Yet the fact of the matter is the universe gives me what it gives me and I pass it on. And so why? Why talk about this? Because, gang, we can make a difference as a species. I talk all the time about the quantum field. I talk all the time about how we can come together as a species and raise the vibration. We can raise the frequencies around us. We talk about that a lot in the metaphysical community. And when we raise those frequencies, we can have the opportunity to come together and actually do things like affect the electromagnetic discharge in the ionosphere, which again affects high cloud movement, which again affects weather. So yes, consciousness affects weather in addition to carbon emissions, people, okay? And once we figure out that everything is connected, we're going to have a much easier time here on planet Earth where we're learning to get along. So this is why I am so super, 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 super excited, and I'm honored, and I'm humbled, and I'm thrilled, and I'm overwhelmed, and my brain is blowing up that we've got the Road Angel that's ready to rock and roll. Because it's just time. It's time to show people what we are truly capable of. So again, like our Facebook page, follow us on Instagram, The Road Angel, and pass that trailer around and just let's get that whole hashtag Team Light going. Let's get everybody in one place to just recognize that the power of the human species is unfreaking believable, especially when we choose to use it for good. Use your powers for good. Use them for good. There you go. All right, gang. So now that I've got that big announcement out of the way, which was really fun to make, by the way. So there you go. I do want to let everybody know that on May 18th, which is just in a few days here, The Road Angel crew is going to be up in Butte, Montana at the Mind, Body, and Soul Fair. And I'm a keynote speaker. I'm the keynote speaker, actually, up there. And I'm speaking from 2 until 3:30. And actually, we're starting filming for the Road Angel at the Metaphysical Fair. So we're going to have a Road Angel booth. Come over and say, hey, if you're up at, it's actually Montana Tech up in Butte. This event is actually free to the public. So come on in and just meet the amazing practitioners that are going to be there. Say hi to us at the Road Angel booth. You'll probably see the crew wandering around. You might even get on the show. I'm going to be taking questions after my keynote speech and after my talk. It's not really a speech, it's a talk. I'm talking with everybody. Afterwards, it's going to be so much fun. Okay. I've got to pack myself together. Get it together, Danielle. Okay. So hopefully I'll see you at Montana Tech, May 18th, up at the Mind, Body, and Soul Fair. That would be super awesome. Now, evolving over into our other topic today, and it kind of goes hand in hand with what we're talking about with the Earth. You know, we're talking about consciousness actually affecting the weather. We're talking about consciousness affecting Mother Earth directly, and it does. It really does. And I talk about this a lot. There was a time when I was a major skeptic. Oh my God, I was awful. I was kind of an a-hole about it, actually, if I were to be really honest with myself. I was awful about really accepting the fact that energy and consciousness or mental capacity, I guess, could actually have an effect on weather. And it wasn't because I didn't believe in the power of thought, because obviously I do. I mean, look at the field I work in. It was more that I kind of felt like the planet of Earth, that she had her own groove, and we were more like a little teeny weeny flea on the back of the elephant, you know, that we weren't really going to move all that much in terms of the elephant's sphere, you know. Yet then, of course, I started really thinking about it and recognized that there's almost 8 billion of us on this planet. And you take that much consciousness and you have an unstoppable wall of transformational energy. And so when we have that going on, that means that human beings do more to the earth than simply litter on it or pollute it. We can pollute the earth through many different means. We can pollute the earth with thoughts. We can pollute the earth with negative talk. We can freaking pollute the airwaves with all the garbage and junk and nastiness that we actually text to one another and place on social media. I mean, all of that energy is getting beamed, and now we know that these 5G towers are going in, so it's getting beamed through these high frequency, millimeter waves, which are permeating our brain tissue in a way that's just not healthy, okay? So if you picture all of this negativity flying through the air, then we definitely want to balance that with something positive. So we as human beings, gang, we litter way more than just some god-awful plastic bottles and plastic bags, which also do quite a bit of damage to this environment. We litter with our consciousness. We litter with our words. We litter with our attitudes. We litter. And we blindly stumble through this earth as if someone else, the magical mom in the sky, is going to descend behind us and pick up our crap. Seriously. You know when you were 5 and you just kind of ran around and spilled everything and could care less because mom would clean it up? That's kind of how humans are acting right now. And why is this pertinent to our discussion today? Well, on the earth, many, many creatures exist. Humans are only one of them. We've got extra dimensional creatures. We've got intra-dimensional creatures. We've got animals. We've got bacteria. We've got plant life. And we have a realm of beings that has lived here and predates human beings that we actually have quite a record of. And we call these beings fae or fairies, and they are referred to in many different cultures. And what I think is so fascinating about the elemental kingdom is their job is literally to take care of nature. They work in tandem with nature. They are part of nature. They do not see themselves as secondary or separate from the earth, not as someone living upon the earth. They are someone living with the earth, okay? Sounds a lot like our Native American cultures before they got all colonized and weirded out, and everything else happened to the indigenous populations. So what we're talking about today is the elemental kingdom and how the elemental kingdom associates with the planet Earth and with humanity. And one of the most important things to think about here is that elementals are not a pretend group of beings, okay? Now look, I love me my vampire shows and my werewolf shows and my mummy shows. I love popping a big old bucket of popcorn and making myself just bloated out, eating as much of it as I possibly can, and watching those black and white 1950s horror extravaganzas where mostly women just fainted a lot. So if you were an actress in the 50s and you got cast in Dracula, girl, you better been a good fainter. Otherwise, you were passed over. Next, we need a better fainter, a little more screaming, a little more eye roll. So my whole point here, besides the fact that, yes, I really do love vintage horror movies, is that elementals are not an incarnation of our imagination. And again, I would love for any real vampire, for any actual preternatural creature that cannot step into the sunshine, or either it bursts into flames or it sparkles, that cannot be around garlic, that turns into a bat and flaps around. I would love you to come forward, like in True Blood. I promise I won't burn you at a stake. I won't think anything rotten about you. I won't think the devil created you, because I honestly have yet to find one of these creatures anywhere. I mean, I can't find them. Not in the not in this third dimension. Now, there are some beings that are elemental beings that we could really, really throw into the Dracula category, but not a classic vampire. Okay, that it would be like a vampire, kind of like those perfumes in the 80s. If you like Dracula, you'll love this elemental. Okay, so I've seen that. I've seen interdimensional beings that act a lot like what we might call a vampire. However, in this third dimension, something sleeping in a coffin, I mean, the full Lon Chaney, I have yet to find a real, true, honest to God, by its definition, vampire. So I think the vampire is more created in our minds by that which we fear. And it's an analogy for darkness, or, quote, the devil. Vampires can't come in, evil can't come in unless you invite it. And we all know metaphysically that if we're dealing with darkness, or we're dealing with the lower vibration, that lower vibrations cannot actually affect the incarnation of the self unless we invite them in. Thank you for your time today. So now that we know, what a vampire is and is it really real? And obviously we have some mental illnesses and some actual physical conditions that are medical that cause people to grow hair all over their body. Yeah, we have mental illnesses affected by the moon, where people would howl at the moon and whatnot. Yet again, in all of my metaphysical decoding of all ethers, of all planes of existence, at least in this third dimension, I should say, I've not found a werewolf. And I'm bummed out, because I really like werewolves and vampires. Come on, True Blood. So why am I laying this out here like this? Because when we talk about elementals, when we talk about the fae, when we talk about fairies or the fair folk, we're talking about beings that are real and have been documented by world cultures all over the place. So, elementals are God's middle management basically for nature. Mother, Father, God makes everything to work together. And for those folks who are hardcore biblical readers, I always talk about this. Cain kills Abel, and, Cain gets kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and they're supposed to be the only people on earth, according to Genesis. But somehow Cain goes to live, as says Genesis, with the people in the mountains. Who the frick are the people in the mountains, man? I mean, come on. I thought we were talking about Adam and Eve and the only people on earth, but there's these people in the mountains. Well, the elementals lived here for epochs before human beings did. And it's really important to remember, gang, that our modern version of a human, we're a heck of a hybrid. We're an off-world hybrid. We are what evolved here on Earth hybrid. We're a little bit of a mutt species in general. And so there were all kinds of hominins running around the earth. And before that, there were the elementals, the elemental beings which were living in beautiful synchronicity with the earth and still are. And so if you wonder, well, why can't we find these fairies? Why don't we see these fairies? Well, let me give you a great example of an elemental. Bigfoot or Sasquatch is part of the elemental kingdom. If you want to call Bigfoot a fairy, go right ahead. I personally would buy Bigfoot dinner first. Who knows if Bigfoot's going to be offended by that? We don't know. You know why we don't know? Because Bigfoot doesn't stick around. Bigfoot goes into some really amazing fairy rings and fairy circles, which are actually vortex points. We now know that those are electromagnetic folds in space-time that are oftentimes naturally occurring. They're naturally occurring little puckers in the space-time fabric that oftentimes appear above certain rock formations, certain underground water systems crossing, because the Earth, again, is a giant electromagnet, right? So Bigfoot will disappear. It will flat up disappear right in front of people. It will walk into thin air and just disappear because the elemental kingdom knows how to navigate these little puckers in space-time called vortexes, and we like to call them fairy rings and fey portals and all kinds of other things. Yet a lot of these beings, a lot of our fae, just aren't really traipsing around in a corporeal format at this point. And they could. I mean, human beings, okay, the hominins that became humans, had sex with fae, okay? We reproduced with these beings because they were genetically close enough to us that we could. So there's human beings running around with all kinds of fae genome. And we have cultures such as Ireland, Scotland, where the longitudinal lines are very conducive to the opening of vortexes, to the puckering of space-time, to fairy portals. And we have those same beings that we find up in the Norwegian, in areas. We have those same beings, the Native American cultures in the Americas talk about these beings. I mean, so if we consider that elementals are God's middle management for nature, and they take care of Earth, and literally they protect sacred areas, and the sacred areas tends to be areas that emit a lot of electromagnetic energy. If we take this into consideration, this is a pretty crowded planet. Okay, there's almost 8 billion of we hybrid-y human people running all over the place. And then we've got fae, or the fair folk, who are all over the place. And by the way, it's funny, I'll tell you a story about the fair folk in a second and why they're called that. Yet elementals aren't particularly thrilled with human beings. I mean, we're a careless species. We litter. We dump our sewage into the water untreated until recently. In some parts of the world, they still just dump raw sewage right into the flippin' ocean. Just right into it. We are not mindful. We have come out of sync with our planet on which we live. And for an elemental, that is a poke in the eye with a hot poker. Because nature is God to them. They are nature. They are one with Mother, Father, God. They don't see a distinction between the planet and themselves. So here's almost 8, there's not quite 8 billions of us, but we're almost there. We're 7 and some billion people on the earth reproducing at a ridiculously exponentially rapid rate, like a virus, dumping, polluting. I mean, even the ethers, even the spiritual structure, we're polluting with our minds, our thoughts. We're augmenting the weather. The weather affects our elemental friends. It affects the plants, the weather, and the electromagnetic density around the planet, and the electromagnetic buildup in the ionosphere. That affects vortex points, which absolutely affects the fae, because that's how they get from here to the other dimension they're living in, because we kind of suck. Okay, so they're like, you guys are the worst neighbors ever. So I'm just going to slip through this dimensional portal and move. Okay, I'm moving. I'm out of here. So we really should be making some peace with these fae, because a lot of elementals are mistaken for demons. And I will go to people's houses. They'll call me in. They'll say, oh my God, something's growling at night. It's this gray, weird looking stringy thing with glowing eyes. It's a demon in the corner. It's not a demon. It's an elemental. And then I talked to the family, and they've dug a pool right through a natural spring and disrupted the spring, and a grove of trees died down the way. Well, of course the elementals are going to get upset. They're like, hey, you weirdo hybrid rude species. with shutting down the mother, father, God that I'm part of that's called Mother Earth with your garbage and your crappy thoughts? Do you really have to kill a grove of aspens because you want a chemical pond in your backyard with throbbing music underwater and lights that change color? What is up with you people? I mean, the Fae are looking at us like, I don't even, you know what? You can just have the planet for a while because we're ageless beings. So we're going to step over here into another dimension. And after the Earth eats you all, we'll come back in about 20,000 years and have a good time. So the Fae have a pretty contentious relationship with humanity right now. And they do know that we're a young species. It's not that they hate us. They just, I mean, how would you feel if you had that one neighbor that dumped crap in your yard every day? I want you to think about this, really think about this. So you have a neighbor that moves in. You're super excited. You're like, wow, this is a neighbor from a different culture. I've never met someone from this culture. And your neighbor seems sweet and kind of naive and, might have even like invited you over for dinner a couple of times. We as humans here on the earth, to interrupt my story, we interact with the Fae all the time. We leave them cream products. We leave them sweets because they love sweets. They love refined sugar. That's something we've figured out how to do is refined sugar, we humans. And that's one of the contributions they can actually get on board with. And they love dairy. So we cultivate cows and sheep and all kinds of goats and get the dairy out of those animals. And, they do like dairy. So they do have a few, bribable points on them. However, overall, okay, going back to the story, if you had a neighbor and the neighbor invites you to dinner a few times and you think you're cool with your neighbor, and then all of a sudden your neighbor just starts dumping raw garbage in your backyard and it stinks like crazy. So you go to your neighbor and you knock on the door, but all of a sudden the neighbor can't hear you because their music is too loud in the house. So you're busy pounding on the front door and the neighbor doesn't even know you're there. And in the meantime, they're dumping buckets of raw sewage into your backyard and they're dumping their garbage into their backyard and they're backing their truck over your fence. And at this point, you're getting upset. So you're calling the police, but your phone line doesn't work all of a sudden because your neighbor cut the phone line when they backed the truck up. So you're cut off from absolutely everything. Your entire yard is getting trashed. It smells like dead Cheerios and poo. And you're over here going, what is wrong with these people? So you go over again pretty soon. Now you've got a big hole in your fence and it's just a giant garbage pile on your side. So you're holding your nose. You're trying not to throw up. You climb over the garbage pile. You go to the back door of these neighbors and you start shouting and yelling at them. And the neighbors freak out and they lock themselves in the house and they call the police because their phone works. Okay? So the police come and they put handcuffs on you and they throw you in jail. And you're saying, but wait, I'm the one who's been violated. And the police say, well, you scared those people a lot. That is the plight of the elemental who is living on a plot of land and a developer comes in and rips the hell out of that plot of land, destroys underground water flow, rips up rabbit warrens and animal habitats, sometimes actually ripping out of the ground the actual layers of the elementals themselves because they live underground. And these beings live massively long life cycles, okay? So, what maybe 25 or 30 years to them is 5 minutes. So the developer that came in and did that 25 years ago is not going to be the person they hunt down. The person they're going to hunt down is the person who's currently living in the house because this just happened for them. So they come and scream and yell just like you would, climbing over the pile of the garbage. You're screaming and yelling. These elementals are screaming and yelling. They're growling. They're throwing things. They're trying to get your attention because we're just dumping crap into the environment and we think they're demons. So we try to cast them out, which, by the way, you can't cast out an elemental. Holy water is not going to do a thing to an elemental. An elemental is technically closer to the fabric of perfection or Mother, Father, God, or the one that is all, because their lessons are different than ours. I mean, they're not we're close to God too. Everybody's a spiritual being and all the playing fields are the same. Yet I'm saying culturally, they haven't separated themselves from source like we have as human beings. Okay. So are you following all this so far? It's a lot. I know. But elementals are physical beings with what we would really honestly consider supernatural abilities, the ability to walk into a fairy ring, to disappear in thin air, the ability to use telekinesis and throw plates or throw chairs across the room. To we humans, that's pretty supernatural stuff. That's pretty Amityville horror. Okay, so that scares us. They're just trying to get our attention, though, because we're a little daft as a species. And those abilities that these supernatural beings that we think are supernatural, those abilities that they have are well within our realm of understanding how that works scientifically. We just don't calm down enough to recognize that, it's not a demon throwing a plate at us. So I want to give you an example of how we miscategorize elementals like crazy. In the 50s, in the 1950s, there was a complaint in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, about what they called little green men having a standoff with a family in a farmhouse. And this family, I'll keep this a really short story. This family finally went into town and talked about how they had been shooting, shotguns at these creatures that the original account actually was that they were kind of silvery, glowy color, and they had yellow eyes, pointy teeth and pointy ears, long, lanky arms, squatty legs, and these creatures were throwing rocks at the house. And when the family went outside to defend themselves from these creatures that were descending on the house like crazy, there was many of them, they thought they were space aliens because, of course, in the 1950s, everything was about the space alien, right? So the story in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, went on to get kind of twisted up, and all of a sudden, a newspaper, which took a little bit more liberty back in the day, and now we're back to taking all kinds of liberties, so maybe it's the same media cycle. We just don't know. Yet, the newspapers were reporting little green men in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. And Hopkinsville, Kentucky still has these little green men festivals. Like, it's a big freaking deal, okay? And what was so startling about the law enforcement, the sheriffs taking these reports from this family is that it was a pretty well-known family. I mean, it wasn't just like a bunch of weirdos living in a cult in a farmhouse. I mean, these were pretty straight-up folks. They certainly weren't people who wanted to be thought of as weirdos because, we're talking about the 1950s in Kentucky. So these are just normal people. And they were watching TV, and all of a sudden all these things are happening to their house, and they start shooting. And they talked about how these beings levitated and how they reached around and grabbed them by the hair when they would go outside. They would hide on the roof. So anyway, and they were never really able to harm these beings when they were shooting shotguns at them. Now, I want you to think about that. If you don't know much about guns, the shotgun is pretty much what you shoot at something if you just need to stop it in its tracks, because it sprays about a 3 to 5 foot hole through whatever the heck it is that you're shooting. It's not like a little tiny bullet. It sprays and annihilates. So the fact that they weren't hitting anything is pretty weird with these beings. Well, so the lore has gone on all these years that these beings were actually aliens. They weren't aliens. They were elementals. They were elementals. What they described, the beings with the gray skin, the glowing orange eyes, the pointy teeth, the pointy ears, that's exactly what the Sioux guides described to Lewis and Clark as the little people that they would not engage when they were taking Lewis and Clark up the Missouri, and they, the famed explorers were doing their thing. So get this. These little elementals are documented all over the place, okay? So what do elementals do? They protect the land. They protect water sources. They protect everything they can when it comes to nature. So why the heck would a bunch of elementals be acting up and throwing rocks and freaking out at a house in Hopkinsville, Kentucky? Well, get this. In 1956, the Department of the Interior ran a geological study on groundwater in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Now, you got to keep in mind, Hopkinsville was not exactly Los Angeles, okay? So the fact that the Department of the Interior was for some reason cued to run a geological study on groundwater in Hopkinsville, Kentucky in 1956, obviously something's afoot, all right? I mean, Hopkinsville was pretty rural. I mean, it was really pretty rural. I wasn't tiny, but it wasn't LA, it wasn't New York, it wasn't Atlanta. Okay. Now, the geological study produced evidence of extreme nitrate poisoning in the water. Now, note we're talking about this was a farmhouse. This was a farmhouse. So nitrates you'll find a lot of times in all kinds of fertilizer. So they found extreme nitrate poisoning in the water. Now, nitrate, you got to keep this in mind too. Nitrate levels of 45 parts per million, okay, lead to birth defects. And there's a birth defect known as blue baby, where infants come in with not enough oxygen and can die. Okay, so if nitrate levels of 45 parts per million are found, it can lead to birth defects such as blue baby, which can kill babies. Okay, that's 45 parts per million, the nitrates in the water. Get this. In 1956, the nitrate levels in Hopkinsville, Kentucky were 225 parts per million, 5 times the lethal amount. So in the groundwater, there was 5 times the lethal amount of nitrate levels in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. What do elementals do? They flare up when we're polluting, when we're wrecking, when we're ruining nature. So that would absolutely explain the elemental occupation in that area during that time frame. That makes a ton of sense because, again, I've actually seen elementals up in Bighorn Canyon in, Montana, Wyoming, and I just caught one out of the corner of my eye, and it scared the heck out of me, and it was through a bunch of poison ivy. And sure enough, they're gray, they're short, they have golden, weird, orangey eyes, wide mouths, pointy teeth, scariest damn thing I'd ever seen. I ran like a little kid into the boat. I was in the canyon. And the elemental was just kind of poking fun at me because I have a decent relationship with them, even though they scare me. And I think because they know that I have a respect for them and I am afraid of them because they're wild. And they don't think like people, and they're part of a natural kingdom that we've completely lost touch with. I'd rather deal with an off-worlder because at least I share genome with an off-worlder as a normal, human being with a prefrontal cortex. I've got some off-world in me, by God. So that's going to make a little more sense to me. These elementals are pure, wild, unbridled nature. Okay? Now, the area that I'm talking about, Bighorn Canyon, that's up on the Crow Reservation. A lot of that land is. And the Crow tribe in Montana calls these elementals the Nirumbi, or the little people. And the little people are so renowned, especially around the Pryor Mountains, around Bridger, Montana, Forsyth, Montana, that even the kids, when they go up to party, I've got nieces and nephews, or nieces mostly, that go up and party in the Pryors. I've got family who lives in Bridger, and if they're going to go up and drink and party, they bring sweets. They bring treats. They bring offerings to the Nirumbi, to the little people up there, because they know that they're partying on their land. There are petroglyphs. There are rock carvings up in the Pryors. It's super fascinating to me. Rock carvings up in the Pryors that are carvings of elemental beings. These pointy-eared creatures with teeth and fire coming out of their hands. I mean, it's so cool. I live in a really cool part of the country. Well, I don't live in Bridger, but I live a couple hours from Bridger, and it's cool. So with the Crow tribe in Montana calling these elementals the Nirumbi, or the little people, we've got the Irish that call them the Siddha, which literally means the people of the mounds, as they lived in underground caves and in rabbit warren kind of areas. They always lived in mounds. Now, keep in mind that we've got people in Ireland calling them the Siddha, or the people of the mounds. And clear across the world, we've got Lewis and Clark coming up the Missouri with their Sioux guides. And the Sioux guides are trying to steer clear of a particular mound where the Nirumbi, the little people, took off and injured, mortally wounded, and maimed 300 of the Sioux's best warriors because of their supernatural abilities. And, the indigenous nations really respected the Nirumbi. They're like, look, you don't mess with these beings, okay? So Lewis and Clark are like, oh, well, we're here. We're white people going up the river. We're here to document all kinds of wildlife, and we'd like to go see your little Nirumbi. And the Sioux said, well, you knock yourself out because we're not going over there. And we're not going to go with you any further up this dang river if you go and make them mad because they hunt you down. So Lewis and Clark just let it rest, but I do think that's fascinating that Lewis and Clark referenced in their writings a mound that their Sioux guide would not take them to because they said the mound belonged to the little people. And here around the world, we've got the Irish calling these little people the Siddha, which literally means the people of the mounds, okay? And in Ireland, these beings are said to either have a silver or green glow about them on occasion. And what's really interesting about that is we know in nature, there's bioluminescence in creatures. So when we're talking about Hopkinsville, Kentucky, they were talking about this silver grayish glow that these beings had, which later got turned into a green glow by a newspaper. However, it's interesting because the Irish cultures talk about the Siddha as having that greenish glow. And we do know that bioluminescence exists in nature. So maybe that's how they see it in the dark. Who knows? Yet I think that's just completely fascinating. Because so we've got these people in Hopkinsville, Kentucky in the 50s talking about this same phenomenon. Pointy-eared, glowing things that scratched and threw rocks and tried to scare the people out of their homes. The shotguns did nothing on them. They could never hit them. We know that elementals can actually move through the dimensional puckers or the vortexes in space-time because they have a command of being in sync with the earth that we don't have because we're a little detached and hybridy, but that's another podcast for another day. So as a physical race, we're dealing with small beings. Elementals are small, and they're anywhere from 12 to 36 inches tall, although we can have some massive elementals. There's tree elementals, there's rock elementals, there's Bigfoot. Yet the type that we're talking about here, like in Hopkinsville, they were said to be maybe 3 feet tall. Maybe they were small. And when we deal with these small beings, we're seeing these same small beings here in Montana. And we hear about these same small beings up in the Norwegian countries. We see the small beings up in Ireland. So in this particular instance, they're small and they do come in many forms. And one being small gray beings with long arms and bulbous heads and pot bellies and yellow eyes and pointy teeth and claws. And like we talked about in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, but also by Lewis and Clark in 1804. That's when they were actually coming up the mouth of the Vermilion River. Okay, that's when they were making their way up that river. So now we've got it in Hopkinsville. So the whole thing is wrapping around. And what I think is interesting is that we find elemental evidence all over the world, gang. In 2004, there was an 18,000-year-old remain that was found. And it was this small being, and they called it the Hobbit, that was found in Australia. And it was found by Australian and Indonesian scientists during a dig in a limestone cave outside of Bali, okay? And the skeleton is 18,000 years old. It's the size of a toddler and labeled as one of the most significant scientific discoveries in 100 years. And that was found in 2004. Okay, so we've got that. We've also got this, I love this. There was this little tiny mummy, and they called this mummy Chiquita, that was purchased by a Cheyenne, Wyoming family in 1929 and examined by the Archaeological Department of the University of Wyoming. And, it was found down in the San Pedro Mountains, okay? And that's down in Wyoming. And Chiquita, this little mummy, it was this little tiny being, was poised, sitting with its arms wrapped around itself, like with its knees up to its arms, like a death pose. It wasn't just tossed in a cave to dehydrate. Somebody sat it up to be, in a particular pose. So Chiquita was poised, sitting with its arms wrapped around itself, and it was identical to another mummy later found in 1932 outside of Casper, Wyoming. So both of these little bitty tiny mummies are being found in Wyoming. And I was just talking about the Pryor Mountains to give you a reference, okay? Bridger, Montana, if you just keep going down the road, maybe half an hour, you're going to hit Wyoming. So Bridger, the Pryors, Casper, all of this Wyoming, Montana corridor, the Nurumbi, the little people, are running around this. Okay, we know this. The Native nations know this. It's common knowledge up here. So In 1932, outside of Casper, Wyoming, there was another one of these little bitty mummies found in the exact same position. And actually, that was the one called the San Pedro mummy, which was studied at the American Museum of Natural History in New York. So the first little mummy that was found in 1929 was examined by the Archaeological Department of the University of Wyoming. The second little mummy in 1932 was studied by the American Museum of Natural History in New York. Okay, so obviously there was something about these teensy-weensy little mummies that was weird enough for both of these massive organizations to get involved in studying them. It wasn't just like, oh, well, that's a baby. That's a mummified baby. I mean, again, the Archaeological Department of the University of Wyoming, which has a great archaeological department, especially at the time, and then the American Museum of Natural History in New York doesn't exactly suck. Okay, so both of those institutions thought there was something weird enough about these beings that they studied them. And both archaeological teams were completely freaking baffled, people, by what they found here. And this is really important to note. The only logical explanation for the shape and size of these little bitty mummy beings was maybe an infant birth defect that's extremely rare. It's extremely rare. And it's called anencephaly. And that birth defect, it's so rare, it's even more rare in archaeology, okay? Because we've only found one mummified infant ever with the anencephaly condition. Only one. In all of the years we've been digging archaeologically, we've only found one, and it was in Egypt, and the mummy was 2,000 years old, of the baby that had this particular defect, okay? Now, the mathematical odds of finding two mummies in the same region from two different time periods, poised in the same manner with the same extremely rare birth defect, okay, if we're talking about these mummies from Wyoming, that is nearly impossible, okay? The mathematical odds of two of these beings, if they were babies, being born with this extremely rare disease, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like the math doesn't work out on that, okay? And especially when the area in question that we're talking about is known for its Nirumbi or its little bitty people. Hello? You know, I mean, talk about the brain matrixing and trying to make something into something it's not just so we feel better about ourselves at night. Humans? Come on. That's crazy. So both of these little mummies in 1929 and in 1932, both were found in this funny little sitting position with their arms wrapped around their knees. Both of them were found in caves high up in the mountains, okay? And both areas that these beings were found are culturally known by the indigenous tribes that occupy these areas to be the Nirumbi or the elemental little people. So seriously, it blows my mind how we'll just try to say, oh, well, it's a dust or it's a bug. I mean, it used to kill me on Ghost Hunters. Remember Ghost Hunters? Jason and Grant? And in fairness to them, they were trying to make sure that everybody was not hysterically thinking there was a demon in their basement just because a moth flew by their infrared camera. So I get that. Yeah, it just used to crack me up because there were spirits that they would catch on that camera and they'd be like, oh, it's dust or a bug. And I'm like, no, it's a spirit. You guys, you got to be able to tell the difference. But anyway, I digress. So, we look at, going back to Hopkinsville, Kentucky, we look at the behavior and the appearance of those beings in Hopkinsville in the 50s. And we literally can say that those beings, the people in Hopkinsville encountered the same elemental beings that have been documented by numerous world cultures. Honestly. And here's another little piece of the puzzle, because you got to remember that elementals walk along ley lines. They travel along ley lines and vortex points, right? So it's very important to know that Hopkinsville, Kentucky is actually near the ley line that connects Roswell, we all know what Roswell is, and Cape Hatteras. And these are two areas where odd occurrences are regularly reported. I mean, from UFOs to elementals to lights that people can't explain out in the woods to disappearing people. I mean, in both of those areas, Hopkinsville is near that ley line that connects Roswell and Cape Hatteras. And we know that elemental beings travel along geomagnetic ley lines and use them to enter the puckers in space-time that we call vortexes, to get away from our incarnation or literally slip dimensions and leave us on this side of the fence because we've gotten too violent, careless, and we keep dumping garbage in their backyard. So can you blame them for moving? I think not. So where I think that we can take a look at this phenomenon of elemental beings is not only are they documented all over the world, yet the reason that the Irish culture called them the fair folk, oh, it's the fair folk. Don't you be worrying about the fair folk. Bring them a little bit of whiskey and some cream and they'll leave you alone. You know, the thing about calling them the fair folk is they scared the crap out of the Irish too, because they are powerful beings that literally have the fire of creation rolling through them. They do not run or operate on the same sort of compressed human system of denial, of limitation consciousness, of separating ourselves from the full capacity of source. They don't do that. They're just awesome and scary and amazing. And the run-in that I had with the elemental at Bighorn Canyon was after I left goodies for that elemental being and for those beings in a particular canyon offset up there. And they kind of mess with you if they like you. Like, do you have that family member that teases you really harshly? Not to be cruel, but they just give you a bad time because they like you? Yeah, elementals. And they are rather intolerant of humans because of what we do. Yet if we are trying, if we are showing respect, they actually kind of have a weird little tiny, not a very big one, but a little teensy weensy soft spot for the oblivion in which we live and for us when we actually show that we're trying. So they're not evil. They're not mean. They're not bad. We could learn a lot from them. And the elemental language, when you find it written, is amazing. It's where we got our cuneiform, and it's all these sticks and straight lines, and it's really fascinating. And I do a lot of studies of different languages, of different cultures, just because I'm a translator, so it's kind of my job. And it's interesting because elemental writing in one part of the world will not mean the same thing as elemental writing in another part of the world, even though they use the same glyphs and the same sticks and the same circles, because their meaning is according to the magnetic pull of the earth. So let's say magnetic north is to your right, and you live in an area where the elementals are all communicating and writing on rocks and doing whatever it is they're doing. Then there's going to be a particular meaning for pointing to magnetic north, and that might point to the right. But if you're in a different part of the world, that meaning of that glyph that's referencing north is going to be in a different position. So it would be like if we wrote the letter E and it looked completely different all over the world. Yet the only way you could decode the letter E was to know where magnetic north was. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I could go on and on and on about different languages, and maybe someday we'll do a podcast on that too. But different languages of different beings, how they're set up, how they communicate, it's so freaking interesting. Oh my God. So our elementals, gang, they are real, and we can learn a lot from them. And they don't hate us. They would love to be able to live in harmony with us and teach us balance. And I'll tell you, a lot of the old gristly ranchers up here in Montana have a deep respect for the elementals, for the little people. And the little people sometimes will come in and take a goat or whatever if they're not being respectful enough with the land. And those farmers know it. Those ranchers know it. So it's not lore. These are actual creatures. And, you know, sometime I'll really get into the deep lore of, it's not even the lore, the history of the elemental beings. We now are down to 12 main houses of these elemental beings. We do have, some of them don't communicate with people. Some of them actually look like rocks. I mean, it's really amazing. And these are real creatures. I can feel them vibrationally, and I've seen a lot of them. So again, if you're a vampire and you're listening today, please reach out to me because I really want to meet you. I do. Please don't eat me. But I really want to meet you because I just think that would be cool. because I have yet to actually find in any known multiverse an actual bat flapping vampire, which I would really, really, really love. So, gang, we covered a lot today. We covered elementals. We covered what they eat. We covered where they come from. We covered what they're called. We covered the fact that they're not pretend. And if you are living in a heavily paved area, if you are living in a space where your plumbing keeps not working or things keep flying off the shelves, plant plants. Try to go out into the indigenous areas around your home, find out what's growing in nature, get some plants. And if you can't get into the ground, if you live in a completely paved over area, get some of those big old planting devices that you can get at Home Depot or whatever, and put some naturey plants in there. And we're not talking, bioengineered flowers here. Go out in your area and find what grows naturally. And try to you don't want to steal it from that area because that's going to be bad. Yet try to go ahead and take a plant that would naturally occur in your area and put it on your land. And you'll start to notice that your plumbing isn't giving you as many problems. Like I said, a lot of times I get called in to clear the demons out of a house and we have unhappy elementals. So I sit as a translator for the elemental beings and the family that lives in the house to try to patch this all up. And they really do love cream and sugar, cream and sweets. It's kind of their little deal. It's funny. Who doesn't love sugar? I mean, come on, it's good. Gang, thanks for sticking with me. This has been such a fun broadcast today, and I'm so excited to announce the Road Angel to you again. Go check us out online at roadangeltv.com. Reach out to the production crew. If you've got something going on in your life that I could potentially do some translation for and help you with, it could be anything. It could be anything from business to personal to maybe you've got an elemental in your basement. Who knows? I do get kind of bossed around by the angelic realm and I do get told where I'm headed. However, I may end up in your town. So you never know. That would be really, really cool. It would be cool. And also hit up our Facebook page, gang, The Road Angel with Danielle Agnew. Like our page, be part of our discussion. And again, this is all in the spirit of just putting out some amazing, uplifting programming that really is here to help us spread hope. Because hope is what actually saves us in the end, gang. All right, everybody, thank you, and I will see you next week.